Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome contestant number 5, Graham Cairns. With a speech entitled On Air Adventure. On Air Adventure, Graham Cairns.
It was 47 years ago last December that I got my first paying job in radio. Now, I know that's hard to believe. How can a magnificent specimen of manhood like this be 47 years old? But it was. It was at 4LG Longreach, colour radio, and it was in a town called Longreach. Many of you may know Longreach. It's an outback town. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. But I will say this about Longreach, it gave me my first job in radio. Now, things have changed just a bit since I started in radio. We used to play music off records. For those of you who aren't old enough to remember them, they're big black spinny things like this. And our commercials were played off cassette. For those who are under the age of about 40, you may not recognise these. And everything that we did was done live through a microphone. These days, the music is all on digital. The commercials are all digital. Even the voice tracks are digital, so if you make a mistake, you can just go back and correct it. But that hasn't always been the case. Things have changed. Some things in radio, however, have not changed. And one of those is that the new kid always gets the job that nobody else wants. In my case, it was Ranch Club. 2 hours of country and western request music. Now, I'd grown up in the city and knew nothing about country music, let alone about the specific subgenre of country music called country and western, you know, rickin' down, down. But I remember the first songs I ever played on air. There was the Singing Kettles version of Airmail to Heaven. Oh, Daddy, I hope you'll forgive her. I'm sending this letter with love. I'm sending it airmail to heaven, to your new home up above. It was Dog's Vomit. And it was followed by Slim Dusty's The Biggest Disappointment in the Family Was Me, and I knew exactly how he felt at that point. But, as I say, the new kid gets the job that nobody else wants. Something else that hasn't changed in radio in all these years is funeral announcements. You see, in a small country town like Longreach, where there is no local daily newspaper, people can die and be buried before their friends hear about it. And so radio stations fill the niche by going on air at the same time every morning and doing funeral announcements. You'll play this maudlin organ music, the sort of, Claude Rains version of Phantom of the Opera. And the relatives and friends of the late Fred Nurk are respectfully invited to attend his funeral, which will leave from St Zacchaeus the Tax Collector Church in Eagle Street, Longreach, for interment in the Longreach Cemetery at 2 p.m. this afternoon. And then you'd fade the music and leave a pause, respectful pause, before doing something. But you couldn't play an advertisement at that point because, well, people don't want their products advertised next to dead people, obviously. So you'd play a song. And I've had some inappropriate songs that I've heard, like, wah, 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 staying alive, staying alive. Perhaps better was up, up and away. But much worse was I fell into a burning ring of fire. Now, I was lucky, I never made that mistake, but I will tell you that one morning I was sitting there and I had the record ready to go and I was reading a funeral announcement for this particularly crabby old biddy. You know, the sort of woman that's everybody's going to turn up to her funeral, but just to make sure that she's actually dead. Well, I was about to play the record when I realised it was Ding Dong, the witch is dead, Let's just say they got a slightly longer than normal respectful pause while I frantically queued up a record on the other turntable. But I did dodge that bullet. Doesn't mean I didn't make mistakes. I mean, I was a young bloke in my first job away from home. And young blokes are not notorious for planning things like taking meals at night. Didn't matter because the Boomerang Cafe was only 5 doors down the road and they made great hamburgers and you'd put on a long record and go down and grab a burger. Until the night that I put on the album version of Creedence Clearwater Revival's Heard It Through the Grapevine. Ran for 10 minutes, 46 seconds. It was perfect. Except And as I say, this is back in the days when we used to play music off these big black spinny things. Got about 4 minutes into the song, apparently, as I came back into the studio, I discovered that for about 6 minutes, all the audience had heard was heard it through that, 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 heard it through that. Yes, embarrassing. But not as embarrassing as this one last story that I will tell you. And that is, I was sitting there ready to read the news one morning, and the DJ is on the other side of the desk, and he made a complete and utter hash of introducing a song. Remember, this was all live. We couldn't do voice tracks. He just threw his headphones off, looked across the desk at me and says, "Jesus Christ, I bleeped that one up, didn't I?" Well, I just pointed to the on-air light over his shoulder. He turned around, looked at it, looked back at me, went, "Ah, bleep," and then turned the microphone off. We didn't get a phone call. We didn't get a letter. We didn't get an email. Well, we couldn't have got an email. This is long before email days. We didn't even get a fax. No, we got nothing, which means either nobody heard it, which at 7:30 in the morning is sort of a depressing thought, or worse, they were so used to this sort of thing happening in Longreach that they thought, meh, it's just another day at Colour Radio 4LG. And that's depressing as well. But here's the thing. I had a number of disasters in my nascent career at 4LG. And yet I managed to parlay those mistakes, those disasters, into a career that gave me 50 years of joy and pleasure. If you've got somebody in your circle, your family, your friends, who's in one of those jobs where they're the new kid who's doing the job that nobody else wants, they're doing the scut work and they're not happy, remind them that from there is only one place they can go, and that is up. The world is quite literally their oyster, and that's something else that never changes. Madam Contest Toastmaster.